So my name's Chris Speed. I'm a reader in digital spaces at the School of Architecture, Edinburgh College of Art. And my role is to teach and supervise students as well as to bring in research funding to some extent. And the Tales of Things project kind of came into being out of a sandpit. Sandpits are new forms of funding processes in which a research council, to some extent, hothouses 30 or so people in a hotel for 5 days. So it's a bit of a lock-in. It's a little bit Big Brother meets Dragon's Den, because they promise at the end of it that there'll be millions of pounds, £3 or £4 million on the Friday to be given away to the best projects that emerge through new ideas. So I went along in December 2008 and by Wednesday had worked out that a group of 5 other academics were quite interesting to talk to, and we'd kind of come around an idea to do with tagging and the idea that objects, I'm looking for an object now, this is really banal object, but an Orangina bottle is more than just being the Orangina bottle. It might actually harbour memories of, for me it might take me back to France actually when I was a teenager, when you used to have to shake it to wake it. So we originally the idea that objects could be a critical part of communities actually, and that communities, if we're to try and sustain them and understand what communities are, then maybe don't worry about people too much. Well, you do worry about people, but perhaps use objects as a means to perhaps understand what the connections are between people. So we had a very simple idea really, which was that QR codes, which were emerging at the time, and RFID tags, which are in some ways being embedded in many of the objects that we buy. Marks and Spencer's are putting RFID tags in baked bean tins so that even stock control is easier. We're all very familiar with traditional barcodes being a means of accessing price in Tesco's or some such at the checkouts, but actually they're all linked to databases. To some extent this is a thing, but it's also an instance in a database somewhere. And really our idea was that actually most of those databases are pretty dull, but then again YouTube is a really fascinating database full of social stories, horror stories probably, comedy, but it's full of social memory. So all you have to do, and all we thought was, wow, couldn't you just link barcodes to social memory and social stories? And that's all we did really. So the idea was very simple. We pitched to the Research Council that we could have a project called Totem, which is Tales of Things and Electronic Memory, which has since really just got abbreviated to Tales of Things. And at talesofthings.com, if you go along to it, it's a Web 2.0 site. You sign up, we give you an account, then you come to the website and you really just bring an object. And then you say, I'd like to add this object to the database. So you add the object and you bring a picture with it. And you also tell a story, but you also link to YouTube clips, to audio boo clips, and then give it a geography, a sense of where it is, where it belongs. And then you press go. And at that point, we then generate you a unique QR code. And the idea is that you then print out that QR code and stick it to the thing, be it whatever you want it to be. And that if anyone comes across that thing, that barcode then allows them, through the use of the mobile phone, the QR code readers for the iPhone and the Android, allows them to access that. So, and it's been great. It's been a really, really worthwhile process. It's a 3-year program. We're probably 20 months through that now, so we finish August 2012. The website is quite comprehensive. We've got thousands of users and objects now. Having said that, there was a point in time when we were moving towards seeming to have a website which was full of memories, but actually the project was all about objects. It was all about things, and we'd turned into another YouTube. So we then embarked on a very small intervention into an Oxfam shop in May 2010, where we hung around, with their permission, an Oxfam shop in Oxford Road, Manchester, as part of the Future Everything Festival. And we hung around in the shop with a research assistant. And when someone came into the shop and dropped something off, trying to think of something useful, a book or something, but as someone dropped it off, Mike would ask people to tell a story into an iPhone, just an audio story, and then in the back room we would then attach QR codes to all the objects. then a week later, when the festival opened, Oxfam opened with about 50 different objects inside it, which then had stories attached to it. What we also did was attached an RFID tag to accompany each of the QR codes, so that when people came into the shop, they had two choices. They could either scan the QR code just quite discreetly with their own iPhone and listen to the story of the artifact, or they could tap it with one of our RFID wands. And if they tapped it, then the story would then come across the public speakers in the shop. So very quickly you had this very kind of moment of a kind of poltergeist or some ghost coming from the past where, whoa, this book has such and such story attached to it. And it was really powerful. I think there's something that it wasn't YouTube. It was just this ghost, this story, so that the object was literally speaking to you, and it would tell a story about the previous owner, what it meant to them. And it was astonishing, actually, picking something up which doesn't talk. It might have the residue and the marks of an owner, a patina, if you like, a patina of marks and decay. But when it started speaking to you and it gave it a gender, suddenly it had a female voice. One of the jumpers featured in a barbecue, so you could almost give it a smell, and then it just took you straight away, and it took you to a time and a place where this thing suddenly had a memory, an association with people. And on the back of that, it went really well. They sold everything, which is astonishing, because some of the objects were just, you just wouldn't want them. Well, I wouldn't want them anyway, taste perhaps. But everything sold, and they then phoned us back 3 months later when they did the accounts for May, that actually had made 52% profit during that week, and then 40% the following 2 weeks, and it dropped back down to normal. Now, it could have been the hum of the exhibition, but there were no objects in there anymore. So they think that stories may well increase the value of second-hand goods. So now we're working quite closely with Oxfam, and we've just recently finished a piece in Selfridges. Once a year, Annie Lennox's group called The Circle, which are kind of quite cool female, not just celebrities, but women who've done well and work well with Oxfam, and they then bring along and donate objects. Colin Firth donated one of his jackets from one of the Oscar ceremonies. Annie Lennox donated dresses and all manner of things. But we had the chance to capture some of these stories. And Annie gave away a dress, which was... So all you do really, to some extent, is you use our iPhone app. There's an Android app as well, which is called Tales of Things. And like most of the QR code readers, it allows you to scan a QR code. So the camera boots up. And if I find the right tag on this sheet here, you'll see it, and it takes it straight away to the object. And Annie's left a small message there, and you can also leave tales as well, because the team bought this back because it came quite a profound object. So if I click the YouTube clip, however, that'll take me off to YouTube, and fingers crossed, if I've got a good connection, it should then play Annie's movie. And there's this very much idea that Annie's left stories on things, and that as we move through the world, increasingly those memories attached to things won't be just temperature and money, but they might be social stories.
At Hyde Park in London. So if you buy this and wear it...
And so things seem quite healthy at the moment. People seem to be quite attracted. We're working with the National Museum of Scotland, museums in London, fishery museums up in Anstruther, and people are beginning to value really just a substrate for this. What's particularly rich, I think, and I suppose, because QR code isn't new, and arguably what we're doing isn't new in the retrieval, but the point really is that the write back. So new projects that we're involved in are really trying to write back to objects. So this isn't a shoe. It looks like a shoe, but I assure you it's not a shoe. This is a holder for shoe memories. So what people have done here is, and we're putting these in the National Museum of Scotland, a bunch of different objects, is that people are invited to come along and write stories, tell stories, shoe stories onto this shoe. But this isn't a shoe. I assure you it's not a shoe. This is just a memory holder for different shoes. So we quite like the idea that actually it's just to what extent is this shoe outweighed with other shoeness, and trying to transform objects and see how, in the same way the museum, you have a sword, a Jacobite sword might be in the museum, but if my son, who associates swords with Star Wars, then he'll write his story onto the Jacobite sword, transforming swordness. What is swordness? So what we're fascinated in, I think the research breakthrough is the write back. How many QR codes do you come across which are read only, and how many afford the chance to write back and then contest what that particular thing is actually telling you? So if you could write back to Orangina and say that this is France, it's nothing to do with Coca-Cola or whatever they think, this is France, and it's part of my memories of France. So that's where the critical breakthroughs, I think, the project's achieved.